or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Corrine, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 21st, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As always, thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are: a federal judge in California granted a temporary restraining order prohibiting Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery from closing an $81 billion merger deal. Electric vehicle maker Polestar confirmed that it won't appeal a national security motivated Commerce Department ban on selling new models in the U.S. In the wake of the 2026 World Cup, the most popular ever, FIFA, is planning to cash in on media rights for the 2030 and 2034 tournaments. A chip stock rebound lost steam, helping to pull down the S&P 500 and Dow by 0.2% and 0.6% respectively, and the Nasdaq by less than 0.1%. An index of U.S. leading economic indicators edged lower last month as consumer spending weakened. Icon Enterprises struck a deal to sell auto service chain Pep Boys to private equity-owned Mavis Tire Express Services for about $700 million. BlackRock is leading a debt sale targeting at least $12 billion for its massive new El Paso data center project backed by Meta Platforms. Ryanair posted a drop in fiscal first quarter profit, hit by lower fares and higher jet fuel cost. Domino's Pizza reported higher profit and revenue for the second quarter, but same-store sales growth slowed. The EU's executive arm fined Alibaba's AliExpress the equivalent of $629.2 million, the largest penalty handed to a company under the Blocks Digital Services Act. Startup Neo was launched with $100 million in funding as investors pour cash into AI ventures led by veteran cybersecurity executives. Now for the key articles under the worldwide section. Andy Burnham, Britain's 7th Prime Minister in a decade, arrived at 10 Downing Street, pledging that a bigger, more muscular state can solve the country's economic woes and restore political stability. Israeli intelligence believes Iran moved thousands of uranium-enriched centrifuges into tunnels deep beneath a mountain last fall, heightening concerns that Tehran could reconstitute its nuclear program. The Iranian ballistic missile attack on a Jordanian airbase that killed at least 2 U.S. service members struck prefabricated housing units where troops lived. Lockheed Martin said it would field a new and cheaper model of Patriot missile that could be deployed faster as global stockpiles of sophisticated interceptors dwindle. Trump will impose an additional 50% tariff on certain goods from Canada, including wine, hockey sticks, and cement, with the White House saying the duties were a response to discriminatory treatment of American products. Ismael El Mayo Zambada was sentenced to life in prison for his role as a top leader of the Sinaloa cartel drug syndicate he ran alongside Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The FDA walked back an earlier statement that a sample of lettuce from Taylor Farms tested positive for the parasite Cyclospora. The American Heart Association said that up to 5 cups of coffee a day are safe for most adults and may benefit cardiac health. The jet given by Qatar that Trump is using as Air Force One will get an update this fall, idling the plane for roughly a month. The picture on today's front page is of a man standing with a very pensive look on his face. And that caption reads, Andy Burnham, the UK's new Prime Minister, said he wants to devolve power from London to the regions. And below that picture are 6 photos of previous Prime Ministers, starting with Keir Starmer, 2024 to 2026, Rishi Sunak, 2022 to 2024, Liz Truss, September to October 2022, Boris Johnson, 2019 to 2022, Theresa May, 2016 to 2019, and David Cameron, 2010 to 2016. The article, Burnham becomes UK's 7th leader in decade, by Max Colchester, London. Andy Burnham, the UK's 7th Prime Minister in a decade, arrived Monday at 10 Downing Street, pledging that a bigger, more muscular state can solve the country's economic woes and restore political stability. Standing in front of the Prime Minister's official residence, Burnham said he was acutely aware the UK had been cycling through leaders at an unprecedented rate. It requires my generation of politicians to raise our game and rise to the new challenge, he said. Britain needs to show the world that we can regain our stability once again. The 56-year-old painted a broad brush vision for the country, where a more interventionist state would roll back what he called 40 years of neoliberalism. Burnham wants to devolve power from London to the regions. He plans to present a 10-year plan for the country this year that would offer a new political model and a new economic model. Among the policies under consideration are rent controls and greater state subsidies for energy bills and bus fares, Burnham said. The UK government's 10-year borrowing cost rose to a 2-month high on the back of the announcements. Burnham, on Monday, officially succeeded former Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who earlier in the day handed in his resignation to King Charles III at Buckingham Palace. Labour lawmakers turned on Starmer after just 2 years in charge when Labour cratered in opinion polls. Despite winning a landslide in 2024, Labour Trails Reform UK, an anti-immigration party. Burnham, a former mayor of Manchester, was named party leader last week after no other candidates stepped forward for the job. Labour lawmakers hope a new leader can unite fragmented left-wing voters ahead of the next general election, which must be called by 2029. But Burnham faces a fine line between appeasing left-wing Labour lawmakers and calming financial markets. Investors are betting Burnham's economic pitch will tilt the UK further left, with modest increases in government spending funded by higher taxes on wealth and more borrowing. However, his room to maneuver is constrained because the tax burden and government borrowing are near historic highs. Meanwhile, the economy is predicted to only grow 1% this year. Other articles from the front page follow. IRS chief spied on colleagues when he worked at JP Morgan, by Alexander Saidi. Frank Bisignano, the head of the Internal Revenue Service and Social Security Administration, sits atop two government organizations that store vast reams of sensitive financial data about every taxpayer. More than a decade ago, he was co-chief operating officer at JP Morgan Chase, another perch that gave him visibility and authority over every part of a massive financial institution. At the bank, people familiar with the matter said he spied on fellow executives, using his authority over the security department and position to access sensitive information and internal communications without an apparent business justification. The executive directed his security staff to use software to snoop in the email of rival executives, including Charlie Scharf, JP Morgan's then head of consumer banking, who is now the CEO of Wells Fargo, some of the people said. One executive said he suspected the spying and put a code phrase in his email, which he said Bisignano repeated back to him. Bisignano also accessed a draft complaint from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission about a questioned derivatives trade that was a confidential document only seen by a few members of the legal department, some said. He also directed his staff to use software to surveil the work of the employees, sometimes seeking to track keystrokes, which can show draft versions of written material, others said. The people said Bisignano's goal was to keep a tight rein on employees and use the information to undermine his rivals as he expanded his responsibilities. No allegations are known to pertain to the improper use of customer information. Around the end of 2012, following years of complaints about his behavior, including allegations of disrespectful conduct toward colleagues and underlings, and of breaking of company norms around data collection, Chief Executive Jamie Dimon lost trust in him and told Bisignano he would support him finding a job elsewhere, people familiar with the matter said. Bisignano left the bank to become CEO of First Data, which later merged with Fiserv, a payments company critical to the digital infrastructure used in card transactions and banking. Courtney Forrest, a lawyer for Bisignano, said in a statement that he never spied on co-workers and the other allegations are not true. After Bisignano left the bank, investigators from the legal department found digital traces of the spying activity, including records that showed email access, some of the people said. As a result, Matt Zames, who took over as JP Morgan's sole chief operating officer, increased restrictions on access to sensitive employee information, requiring approval from senior members of the legal department to access emails and other data, some of the people said. President Trump picked Bisignano to become chief of the Social Security Administration, the government retirement system, and he was confirmed by the Senate last year. His responsibilities were expanded later in the year when he was appointed to the new position of CEO of the IRS, running its daily operations. Last Wednesday, the Treasury Department announced Bisignano would take charge of the implementation of Trump accounts, the tax-deferred retirement accounts for children. At the Social Security Association and the IRS, his challenges include modernizing the systems that power the nation's biggest benefit agency and tax collection authority, both of which still rely on technology that is more than 20 years old. At the IRS, which has rotated through a half dozen leaders during the Trump administration, Bisignano is also tasked with enforcing the tax law with a smaller staff. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Israel tells U.S. that Iran moved centrifuges to tunnels. The complex is estimated to reach 300 to 450 feet under solid rock. By Lawrence Norman in Berlin, Anat Peled in Tel Aviv, and Alexander Ward in Washington. Israeli intelligence believes Iran moved thousands of uranium-enriched centrifuges into tunnels deep inside a mountain last fall, Israeli and U.S. officials said, a development that would heighten concerns that Tehran could reconstitute its nuclear program. Israel has passed along the intelligence findings to the U.S., saying the centrifuges were transferred to the Pix-X mountain site last fall after a 12-day war in June in which U.S. and Israeli strikes pummeled Iran's 3 main nuclear sites. As Israel's war aims have increasingly diverged from the U.S.'s, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has tried to persuade President Trump to resume all-out attacks on Iran to further set back Tehran's weapons program and rebuilding effort. The U.S. has stepped up attacks in the past 10 days, and Trump said the U.S. was prepared to attack Pix-X Mountain. Pix-X is a possible target for a nice big fat shot, Trump, a Republican, told conservative podcaster Hugh Hewitt on July 13th. It was the first time he has explicitly talked about Pix-X as a target, although he has previously mentioned an Iranian underground location buried in granite. Known as Mount Kolang in Iran, Pix-X has been under surveillance by the U.S. and Israel for years, but what little is known about Iran's activities at the site, suggest it would present challenges to any airstrikes. Located near one of Iran's main nuclear installations, Pixax was commissioned as an underground replacement for an Iranian centrifuge assembly facility that was badly damaged after a 2020 explosion, which might have been an act of sabotage. Activity has continued there steadily for the past 15 months with truck traffic, tunnel reinforcements, and a security perimeter springing up, said the Institute for Science and International Security, a think tank on nuclear and non-proliferation issues. There was also work around an older tunnel network that dates from 2007, which Iran has since sealed up. It is plausible that Iran moved centrifuges into the tunnels in Pixac, said David Albright, the Institute's president. Experts estimate that the subterranean complex reaches 300 to 400 feet deep beneath solid rock, with enough room to accommodate several nuclear-related facilities. Chinese AI models raise alarm in the U.S. Critics say U.S. tech firms overplay risk to stifle Chinese competition. By Amrith Ramkumar and Tina Lee. Silicon Valley and Washington are debating a multi-billion-dollar question. Should U.S. companies be able to use Chinese artificial intelligence models? OpenAI and Anthropic executives are sounding the alarm about the rise of cheap AI, particularly powerful new models produced in China, suggesting they will lead to a dystopian AI future and present unacceptable security risks without regulation. Some analysts who study the AI industry said the two companies, which are preparing for public listings in the next year, just want to eliminate the competition. The emergence of highly capable, open, autonomous AI systems, including Moonshot AI Kimi's K3 model and Alibaba's Qwen 3.8 Max, which were released in recent days and viewed favorably by investors and users, has turned the AI race on its head once again. Kimi K3 also was competitive with U.S. models on some benchmarks. The debate over the new models, which are open weight, allowing users to download and customize them with company data and for specific tasks, coincides with division in the Trump administration about whether to take steps to limit the use of the models in the U.S. One probable outcome of an open weight model dominant world is full AI communism, which is precisely what China proposes, rather than a market product. AI is a public good which will ultimately be provided by the state as a kind of digital public infrastructure. Dean Ball, OpenAI's head of strategic futures, said in an ex post Friday. Ball, a former Trump administration official, called such a scenario a dystopian hellscape and said he expected the Trump administration to make moves to reduce the usage of open source models. Ball later clarified that he wasn't advocating for the U.S. government to discourage Chinese AI. He also highlighted a central challenge with the AI race. Top-tier AI companies raise billions of dollars to pay for the vast computing resources needed to continue improving AI systems. If everyone uses AI systems that people largely don't pay for, there would be no way to finance continued frontier AI development. Ball, who started at the company earlier this month and focuses on policy strategy and OpenAI, have said his comments don't reflect the company's official positions. The company has developed its own open models, and CEO Sam Altman has previously said OpenAI's past approach of only developing closed tools was unwise. Other top AI executives have warned that OpenAI models present huge risks since developers and policymakers lack control over how they are used or modified. Leaving the front page, Lockheed plans cheaper Patriot. Lockheed plans cheaper Patriot. Lockheed Martin said it would field a new and cheaper model of Patriot missile that could hit the battlefield faster as global stockpiles of high-end interceptors dwindle. The company said its PAC-3 adapted capability effector can be made more quickly and will cost buyers less than half as much as its best-selling missile segment enhanced version. Recent Army budget documents show MSE interceptors cost more than $4 million a round. Lockheed said the new Patriot design can thwart an array of attacks from cruise missiles to close-range and short-range ballistic missiles. It didn't disclose its expected performance against the class of longer-range ballistic weapons that Russia has hurled at Ukraine to devastating effect. U.S. Army officials this year launched a competition to develop a lower-cost interceptor, and that was from Drew Fitzgerald. Pentagon steers contracts into startups. Venture-backed firms and old-school contractors benefit from higher spending. By Heather Somerville. Since taking the top job at the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has rewritten rules and upended traditions that had for decades steered how the U.S. military buys weapons. More than a year into his tenure, he is keeping his promise to shower money on high-tech defense startups, while also unloading ever larger sums of cash on the traditional vendors he has publicly disparaged as slow and bloated. Venture capitalists and startup founders have been salivating at what they hope is a true defense reformation that hands power and billions of dollars to defense tech startups that have been excluded from the inner circle of weapons procurement. For a great time at Disneyland, choose a designated scroller. Avoiding endless lines requires one person in every group be glued to their phone. By Ben Fritz. Anaheim, California. Walt Disney designed Disneyland's Main Street USA to transport visitors out of the modern world into a fantasy packed with old-fashioned storefronts and barbershop quartets. Carrie, Bart, walked past it, all hunched over a twin stroller with her head buried in her phone. Many visitors miss the magic surrounding them in Disney parks these days. They're too busy doing what Bart was, using an app to book and revise ride reservations. The Colorado travel agent's 3 young children were very excited for the Haunted Mansion, so she used her phone to ensure that they could skip the line. At the same time, she was trying to prevent them from getting run over by a streetcar. Since Disney introduced lightning lanes in 2021, debate has raged over whether letting people pay for shorter waits is savvy crowd management or nickel and diming that divides people by income. Hacks to game the system have proliferated. One thing is certain: the headaches and the benefits of modern technology have invaded the happiest place on earth. To have the best experience at Disneyland now, at least one person in every party needs to be the theme park equivalent of a designated driver. The person tasked with making the lightning lane reservations for a group is going to have a very different day, said Jessica Gardner, an influencer known as the Theme Parkette. You're not going to turn a corner and have that unexpected magical experience. During a recent visit to Disneyland, most people I talked to were using Lightning Lane Multiple Pass, which costs $30 to $40 per person and comes with a host of restrictions. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the editorial page, How a Veterans Reform Blew Up. Entitlements become harder to reform as they grow and develop more entrenched constituencies. An unfortunate example came Thursday when House Speaker Mike Johnson was forced to pull a vote on a bill that would help veterans while cracking down on abuse and disability payments. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has spoken about his difficulties reintegrating into society after combat and the disconnection many veterans feel. The Take Care of America's Veterans Act includes some 60 bipartisan provisions that aim to help veterans better transition into civilian life and the workforce. The bill would expand telehealth options and suicide prevention programs. It would pay for a year of housing for veterans who enroll in apprenticeships and create portable occupational licenses after they are honorably discharged, so they and their spouse don't have to get re-licensed in a new state if they move. It would also boost retirement benefits for vets forced to retire with fewer than 20 years of service due to combat-related injuries. Republicans have proposed paying for the bill by codifying a proposed regulation that would limit future disabilities payments for tendinitis and sleep apnea, which is expected to yield some $57 billion in savings over a decade. The Biden Department of Veteran Affairs proposed restricting disability payments for these conditions in 2022 amid ballooning claims and signs of abuse. They point to broader problems in the VA disability system, which is being gamed. Veterans are entitled to tax-free disability payments for injuries that result from military service, with benefits based on the number and severity of injuries. Disability ratings range from 0% to 100%, with higher ratings carrying bigger payments. A 100% disability rating indicates that veterans are debilitated and struggle to function. In recent years, veteran disability payment claims have surged. Since 2010, Overall spending on veteran benefits has soared 478%, which is far more than Medicaid, 177%, Medicare, 164%, and Social Security, 142%. Disability payouts have nearly doubled since 2020 as more veterans claim more injuries. The number of veterans with 100% disability ratings has increased 90% since 2021 and sixfold since 2010. Veterans who have served since 1990 are 3 times as likely to receive disability payments as those in World War II and the Korean War. Veterans who have served since 1990, on average, claim about 9 disabilities, significantly more than those who served in World War II, 2.5, Korea, 2.6, and Vietnam, 4.7. Some of the most common claimed injuries can be difficult to verify objectively, such as tendinitis. 3.6 million vets received compensation, and migraines, 1.3 million. Others may not result from their military service and can be treated, like hay fever, 819,645, sleep apnea, 763,763, penile deformity, erectile dysfunction, 675,632, diabetes, 445,840, and hemorrhoids, 356,424. Consultants and social media influencers coach veterans on how to game the system. One Gulf War veteran with a YouTube channel advertises secret strategies for winning big with VA disability claims and charges for boot camp tutorials to boost disability ratings. Reddit is a popular forum for swapping tips on how to boost disability ratings. I'm at 90% now, which is phenomenal. And I am truly blessed for it, but I can't stop thinking of getting to 100%, one wrote on Reddit. Any not well-known perks or anything once you get 100%? A veteran who claimed to have just retired from the Navy with a 100% rating responded, I had dozens of job applications in, was stressing about where I was going to work next. Now I'm just happy. Another vet chimed in, it's such a beautiful thing. We get to do nothing if we want to. Graham Plattner, the former Maine Senate candidate who received a 100% disability rating, advised fellow vets on Reddit how to boost their payments. Veterans deserve to get treatment and payment for injuries while serving their country. The danger is that government dependency is becoming a way of life for some. As disability payments have soared, labor participation among working age veterans has plunged, while the overall labor participation rate among 25 to 54-year-olds has increased 0.5 percentage points over the last 2 decades. It has declined 8.4 percentage points among vets who have served since September 2001. Enter the House bill, which would help veterans re-enter the workforce. However, Democrats and some veteran groups groused about the limits on disability payments for sleep apnea and tendinitis. Democrats said the bill's benefit enhancements should be paid for by taking money from defense. Republicans folded because they didn't want to be accused of cutting benefits for veterans, and thus blew up a bill that would help veterans. America's ballooning entitlements, including veteran disability payments, are crowding out military spending. That's a recipe for less combat ready force and more injured veterans. From the opinion pages, Trump to China, deal me in. Did America get anything in return for the huge concession it made to Beijing? By William McGurn. Donald Trump put his reputation as a negotiator on the line with China last week. How it turns out will determine whether he is the deal maker he says he is, or just another Westerner who thought he could best China, only to find he's been played. China's Commerce Ministry announced Friday that it welcomed Mr. Trump's decision not to renew an emergency order he issued in 2020 that imposed sanctions on 9 officials from Hong Kong and the mainland. It's confusing because U.S. sanctions on 39 other Hong Kong and mainland officials imposed by other laws remain unaffected. The latter list includes Hong Kong's top man, Chief Executive John Lee. Some see the relief as a kowtow to China because it isn't clear Mr. Trump got anything in return. The subservient Hong Kong government described the move as a positive shift in U.S. policy. Even for those of us who are skeptical about the efficacy of sanctions, it's a huge concession to China. Because Hong Kong is a world trade and financial center, adding to the marginal cost of doing business is more keenly felt there than in larger but less competitive economies. Count Mark Clifford, a skeptic of the move. Mr. Clifford is a former business associate of imprisoned newsman Jimmy Lai and author of A Lai Biography, The Troublemaker. Mr. Clifford runs the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation, and he doesn't like what he sees. The move represents a significant softening of the Trump administration's stance toward China, Mr. Clifford says, coming in the same week as the arrest of more Hong Kong booksellers. Removing these sanctions is a slap in the face for the people in Hong Kong still clinging to their freedoms. He continues, unless the Chinese have made concessions we don't know about, it is impossible to see how this retreat serves U.S. interest or those of the Hong Kong people. In fairness, Mr. Trump succeeded in pressing China to free a jailed Christian pastor, Ezra Jin, whose children are U.S. citizens. Mr. Trump has also met in the Oval Office with Mr. Lai's son, Sebastian, and his administration continues to make the case for releasing the 78-year-old Mr. Lai. Given the special loathing Mr. Xi and China's communist leadership have for Mr. Lai, it's a big ask. But in late 2024, little more than a week before the presidential election, when radio host Hugh Hewitt asked Mr. Trump if he would get Mr. Lai out of prison, he was unequivocal, 100% yes. I'll get him out. He'll be easy to get out. Clearly, that's proving more difficult than Mr. Trump anticipated. So the question now isn't only what happens to Jimmy Lai if he remains in prison, It's also about the consequences for Mr. Trump. Jimmy Lai is the world's most famous political prisoner, even if the president gets a fantastic trade deal. There will be opposition if the price is leaving him behind. Why all the fuss for a non American? First of all, like Mr. Jin, Mr. Lai has an American daughter, Jade. More to the point, although Mr. Lai is British, there is no more ardent, brave, and public champion of America. Our families are close. Jimmy is my godson. My wife and I went into China 3 times to adopt. Each time the Lais were there for us, making their home our girls' home. When I went to work at the Bush White House, Jimmy was thrilled for my daughters, whom he viewed as incarnations of the American dream. On the world stage, Jimmy sees the U.S. as a force for good. He liked Mr. Trump and wasn't afraid to speak out for him. He too wants America to be great. The American experiment in liberty fascinates Jimmy, and his papers and magazines reflected that. China noticed. At his trial, the main charge against him was conspiracy to commit collusion with foreign forces, implying he operated as an agent of the U.S. In reality, he was an enterprising newspaper man whose passion for Hong Kong is a microcosm of his love for America. He saw both as places of opportunity that showed what ordinary men and women might accomplish if given the freedom to do so. Detained since December 31st, 2020, Jimmy has put his faith in America and Mr. Trump. Now we're in the end game. Its conclusion comes down to whether Mr. Trump makes good on a promise he said was easy. Either Jimmy Lai dies in jail or he is freed, likely on humanitarian or medical grounds, Mr. Clifford says. President Trump has offered Xi an easy exit ramp. Let's hope that Xi is far-sighted enough to make the correct choice. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Iran's fortitude is its decisive edge. The Ayatollahs want to fight and have a greater tolerance than Trump for pain. By Ruel Mark Garrick and Ray Taikik. Tehran has a wartime advantage over Washington because the ruling Iranian elite wants to fight and has been willing to endure far more pain than Donald Trump has. The revolutionary faithful have embraced these tests time and time again. In the 1980s, the Iran-Iraq War claimed hundreds of thousands of Iranian lives and nearly broke the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The recent Syrian civil war gave a new generation the opportunity to prove itself. Today's conflict with the U.S. and Israel lets senior Guard commanders, lowly IRGC foot soldiers, and the rest of the theocracy's security forces feel the fraternity of resistance against the regime's enemies. For a dictatorship that lost most Iranians' loyalty years ago, these wars were a boon. The zeal of the revolutionary faithful has baffled many Iranian expatriates and analysts who see a morally, spiritually, and financially bankrupt regime. Team Trump believed that a battered, broken Islamic Republic could be defanged through sustained bombing. The Israelis cited the regime's fragility and the possibility that decapitation could lead to collapse. When the crack-up didn't happen, the war's disappointments led some in the Trump administration to entertain the illusions that once guided the Americans' left engagement with the theocracy. Vice President J.D. Vance, the administration's point man on talks with Iran, returned from his encounter and said, "You talk about hardliners and moderates? What's fascinating to me about their system is that we're seeing even people that I would have assumed are hardliners who are kind of saying, you know what? Maybe it was a mistake for us to do the things that we've done over the last 40 years. Maybe we should turn over a new leaf in the relationship with the United States of America. Even John Kerry would have known better." Mr. Vance's counterparts, Mohammed Badger Ghalibaf, the Speaker of Parliament and a former IRGC general, and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, long the IRGC's diplomat of choice, are revolutionaries ready to out-negotiate their enemies in person. They aren't encumbered by the conservative Shiite sentiment that sees Western infidels as untouchable. For nearly half a century, successive American presidents have viewed the Islamic Republic as a collection of competing factions with moderates and hardliners struggling for control. If Washington somehow pulled the right lever, the thinking went, it could produce a better Iran, where sensible Islamist light nationalists could gain power. Barack Obama's rationale for his nuclear deal was founded on this hoped-for triumph of Iranian pragmatists. Unfortunately for Mr. Trump, the Iranian regime isn't divided. It is probably more unified and determined than at any time since Saddam Hussein invaded in 1980. The bloodbath that ended the popular insurrection in January 2026 resulted from the brutality of Iranian security services and the unity of the ruling elite. There was no daylight among the Islamists in charge when it came to killing rebellious citizens. The regime has been clever as well as bloodthirsty. The most fervently religious have, at least for now, decided not to protest the new hijab light approach, which lets women uncover their heads without fear of beatings and imprisonment. Iran's leaders are betting, at least after the bloodshed in January, that this concession won't be a slippery slope. Since the U.S. began Operation Epic Fury in February, the Iranian regime has been clear about its intentions, especially regarding the Strait of Hormuz. As Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi warned last month, any valid framework must be based on coordination with Iran and the provisions of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. Otherwise, such parallel routes will be suspended. Mr. Vance and fellow negotiators Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff surely had access to Persian speakers at the State Department or Langley, who could have told them what paragraph 5 of the Memorandum of Understanding meant in Tehran. The crisis in the Persian Gulf won't be solved by Washington's bombing more targets or offering more financial concessions to Tehran. Pipelines built to avoid the strait can help, but won't measurably diminish the Persian Gulf's centrality to global commerce. The U.S. Navy must reclaim the Gulf and patrol it indefinitely, despite the hazards. Tehran doesn't believe Washington has the fortitude for such a mission. As long as it's right, the Islamic Republic, not the U.S., will be the most consequential power in the Middle East. Letters to the editor, the topic, Utility planning must change with the grid. More power fortifies electric grid, but perils also lurk. Rightly identifies the pressures facing our electric grid and the important role solar and battery storage are already playing in improving reliability. The real challenge isn't simply adding more power plants or transmission lines. It's creating a more flexible, modern energy system. Meeting these challenges requires first increasing flexibility and only then investing in expensive infrastructure. Before utilities ask families and small businesses to shoulder those costs, they should be required to demonstrate they have fully evaluated and invested in faster, more affordable ways to get more energy out of the grid we already have. And that's another place where local solar, batteries, and other community-based solutions come in. These technologies generate electricity when planned and coordinated together, and they can relieve stress on the grid, reduce peak demand, and respond to fluctuations in milliseconds through advanced battery controls and smart inverter technology. Utilities can and should plan for these resources as integrated community power networks that improve reliability while helping avoid or defer costly infrastructure investments. The grid is changing, and utility planning must change with it. The question isn't whether we need additional capacity. We do. The question is whether utilities are being held accountable for pursuing the most cost-effective, resilient solutions first, so consumers get the reliable, affordable energy system they deserve. From Sean Garden, Chief Programs Officer, Vote Solar, Boston. The Pepper and Salt cartoon takes place in the desert where two men are on all fours crawling along. And one says, "I could walk, but this is really working my core." You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 21st, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Corrine. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day or evening.
You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings, 24 hours a day, of newspapers, magazines, books, and other printed matter to area people who are blind or have a print disability.